When Charles Darwin came forward with his theory of evolution, the mechanism of our origin immediately came into question. No longer was it taken for granted that we were created in God's image. Instead, it was postulated that we were the product of natural selection and the survival of the fittest. For over 100 years, researchers have scrambled to discover the missing link, a set of archaic human bones that would provide conclusive proof of our transition from ape to man. Despite their best efforts, this smoking gun has yet to be unearthed. A new theory into the mystery that surrounds the origin of man has presented itself over the last few decades. This theory postulates that an extraterrestrial presence inserted itself into the natural development of human evolution. Yes, alien intervention. We learn of these non-human extraterrestrial beings when we survey mythology. They were the gods of old. We know them as Zeus, Quetzalcoatl, Enki, Thor, or Fuxi. Mythology reveals the stories of these gods. It informs us that these extraterrestrial beings were responsible for the creation and education of humanity. Creation stories from around the world vividly recount the attempts made by the gods to produce a new race. Many narratives go on to tell how the gods gave us fire to use and clothes to wear. They taught us to plant crops, work with medicinal herbs, and follow the movement of the stars. Regardless of the overwhelming number of mythological accounts offered, scholars are quick to point out that there is no hard, tangible evidence to support alien intervention and an extraterrestrial presence on Earth. They have yet to find a spaceship, a ray gun, or a piece of advanced technology. Perhaps, like the elusive missing link, this kind of evidence will never be found. A growing body of evidence may offer proof of another worldly presence here on Earth. These items may seem insignificant and inconsequential if taken by themselves. Yet when looked at as a whole, they support the notion of alien intervention in our past. They also suggest that human development was anything but natural. The theory of evolution states that all life is related, where it descended from a common ancestor. Complex life forms evolved from simplistic ones. This occurred naturally over time. When a random mutation appeared within an organism's genetic code, the beneficial ones were preserved. It was thought that these changes aided survival. These beneficial mutations were then passed on from one generation to the next. Over time, the accumulated slow but gradual shift in an organism resulted in an entirely new species. The measured transition as described by this theory falls apart when you look at the development of humanity. Examples abound. By 3.6 million years ago, a distant ancestor to modern man, Australopithecus, was already walking upright. This feature, according to researchers, took over 1 million years to develop in these early hominids. Australopithecines had small brains, limited knowledge of tools, and no vocal language. In less than 2 million years, Australopithecines obtained a group of traits that transformed them from being primate-like to looking and acting more like contemporary man. In this transition, our next set of ancestors, Homo erectus, had shed their body hair. They could speak to one another. They used tools, hunted animals, and controlled fire. They showed all the signs of an emerging modern culture. Scientists are still at a loss. How could all of these changes occur in such a short span of time? The development of humankind is not the only place that we find strange evolutionary changes that defy rational explanation. It was the dawn of the creative explosion. By 35,000 years ago, our ancestors began collecting and grinding the seeds of wild grasses and grains to bake flatbreads. It was during this time, for reasons scientists cannot explain, that inkhorn wheat experienced a rare genetic event. Early inkhorn wheat mixed with a form of goat grass to produce a completely new species that was able to replicate itself. In nature, two different species cannot inbreed and yield viable offspring. For example, when horses and donkeys are bred together, their offspring is a mule. The genetic makeup of a mule renders them infertile. Nevertheless, miraculously, 30,000 years ago, this is exactly what happened. The marriage between these two unrelated plants produced a new variety of grain, now known as Emmer Wheat. The newfound characteristics of Emmer Wheat does have its upside. Emmer Wheat, unlike elkhorn wheat, has a higher gluten content. Gluten is what allows bread dough to rise in the oven. It also provides bread with a lighter, less dense texture. What makes this little-known marvel even more interesting is that 20,000 years later, on the dawn of the agricultural revolution, another miracle occurred in the advancement of wheat. The already genetically enhanced Emmer wheat mixed with another version of goat grass, which produced an early form of domestic wheat. This version of wheat is the same variety we use today. Scientists at the lab of the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center have been attempting for years to reproduce what is believed to have been a natural occurrence. We've been reenacting in the lab what took place in nature 9,000 years ago, stated researcher Richard Tredouin. Tredouin has been trying to cross wild goat grass with Emmer wheat to produce a new form of wheat bread. Chemicals are used to induce hybridization and chromosome doubling in these two distinct species. The inexplicable transformation of wheat in Antiquity seems anything but organic. Did the gods intervene and genetically engineer this ancient foodstuff? The mystery doesn't end there. It is not only in the development of modern wheat that we find unexplainable genetic changes in the plant kingdom. Across the globe, the staple grain crop of the Americas is maize, Indian corn. The origin of maize has intrigued historians and geneticists alike. Maize does not grow naturally on the planet. For years, scientists were at a loss to explain where it came from. Recent research seems to indicate that the development of corn was a feat of genetic engineering. They believe that corn was intentionally developed from the inedible wild grassy plant called teosinte. They suggest that our ancestors painstakingly grew and manipulated the tough-shelled plant for hundreds, if not thousands, of years. What emerged from this multi-generational experiment was the luscious kernels of corn we see today. Another area that is often overlooked in the forward movement of humanity is the domestication of animals. Could changes to specific animal species offer potential evidence of alien intervention? Domesticated animals, other than the dog, began appearing in the archaeological record about 10,000 years ago. During the next 5,000 years, Domestication boomed in both the plant and animal kingdoms. Sheep, pigs, goats, cattle, horses, camels, chickens, guinea pigs, and llamas provide a partial list of domesticated animals that began popping up around the globe. Then about 2500 BC, for whatever reason, it stopped. We have not added the names of any new domesticated animals to this list, despite the advances in our society and culture over the last 5,000 years. Domesticated plants do not fare much better. These examples are only a few of the many seemingly odd coincidences that have occurred during the meteoric rise of humanity. Scientists over the past 100 years are no closer to understanding the hundreds of changes that have transpired with relation to our species and us. They do not understand how these changes could have occurred short of a miracle. In turn, they want proof of alien intervention in the history of the world. While the evidence presented here is not a smoking ray gun, what they represent does cause us to pause. Was the hand of an extraterrestrial god involved in our evolution? Were they responsible for engineering a number of plant and animal species that humankind ultimately benefited from? Did their intervention directly promote the culture we have today? The principle of Occam's razor states that among competing hypotheses that predict equally well, the one with the fewest assumptions should be selected. Based upon relevant information, the concept of alien intervention in our past makes the fewest assumptions. It answers the age-old question of where we came from. It solves the riddle of the missing link. It is not missing. It never existed. It also clarifies how we learn to track the course of the stars, control fire, read, write, and govern ourselves. We did not discover it. We did not figure it out or invent it on our own. It was taught to us by the gods of myth.